recording?
Yep.
Okay. Good morning, third grade. This week we are going to be talking about character motivation. Character motivation is the reason why a character does something. We can find character motivation by asking what a character's problem is. We can notice a character's actions or dialogue. We can see what they're doing and what they're saying to determine why they're doing what they're doing. Good readers need to understand character motivation so that they understand why a character is choosing to do the things that they are choosing to do. So today we are going to be looking for character actions, dialogues, and thoughts in a story that give us clues about what a character is doing and why, what their motivation is. We are going to be reading another story by Patricia Polacco. Today we are just going to read a few pages, and then next week we'll finish some more pages of the book. This story is called Thank You, Mr. Falker. The grandpa held the jar of honey so that all the family could see, then dipped a ladle into it and drizzled honey on the cover of a small book. The little girl had just turned 5. "Stand up, little one," he cooed. "I did this for your mother, your uncles, your older brother, and now you." Then he handed the book to her. "Taste." She dipped her finger into the honey and put it into her mouth. "What is that taste?" the grandma asked. The little girl answered, "Sweet." Then all of the family said in a single voice, "Yes, and so is knowledge, but knowledge is like the bee that made that sweet honey. You have to chase it through the pages of a book." The little girl knew that the promise to read was at last hers. Soon she was going to learn to read. Tricia, the littlest girl in the family, grew up loving books. Her school teacher mother read to her every night. Her red-headed brother brought his books home from school and shared them. And whenever she visited the family farm, her grandfather or grandmother read to her by the stone fireplace. When she turned 5 and went to kindergarten, most of all, she hoped to read. Each day she saw the kids in first grade across the hall reading, and before the year was over, some of the kids in her own class began to read. But not Tricia. She still loved being at school because she could draw. The other kids would crowd around her and watch her do her magic with the crayons. "In first grade, you'll learn to read," her brother said. I'm going to stop right here and I'm going to think about Tricia's motivation. So what is Tricia's problem? I'm still not sure. They haven't really mentioned that in the story. What does Tricia want? She really wants to learn how to read. And I can find that in my text evidence because right here it says, most of all, she hoped to read. She also watched the first graders read in the class across the hall. So I know that she probably really wants to learn how to read, and that's her motivation. In first grade, Tricia sat in a circle with the other kids. They were all holding Our Neighborhood, their first reader, sounding out letters and words. They said beh, beh, oi, boy, and look. The teacher smiled at them when they put all the sounds together and got a word right. But when Tricia looked at a page, all she saw were wiggling shapes, and when she tried to sound out words, the other kids laughed at her. "Tricia, what are you looking at in that book?" they'd say. "I'm reading," she'd say back to them. But her teacher would move on to the next person. Always, when it was her turn to read, her teacher had to help her with every single word. And while the other kids moved up into the second reader and third reader, she stayed alone in Our Neighborhood. Tricia began to feel different. She began to feel dumb. Well, I think I figured out Tricia's problem. She's really struggling to read. Her motivation is still the same. She still wants to learn how to read. I can figure out that she began to have, that her problem was, she's having trouble reading because all she saw were wiggling shapes. And when she tried to sound out words, the other kids laughed, right? And I can also use evidence to prove my theory about her motivation about her problem, because she's saying that the other kids moved up into the second and third reader, but she stayed behind. So her problem, I think, is that she's really struggling to read. The harder words got for the little girl, the more and more time she spent drawing. How she loved to draw, or just sitting and dreaming, or when she could, going for walks with her grandmother. One summer day, she and her grandma were walking together in the small woods behind their farm. It was twilight. The air was sweet and warm. Fireflies were just coming up from the grasses. As they walked, Tricia said, "Grandma, do you think I'm different?" "Of course," her grandma answered. "To be different is the miracle of life. You see all of those little fireflies? Everyone is different." "Do you think I'm smart?" Tricia didn't feel smart. Her grandma hugged her. "You are the smartest, quickest, dearest little thing ever." Right then the little girl felt safe in her grandma's arms. Reading didn't matter so much. So I want to stop and think about what the grandma's motivation is. She's hugging Tricia and she's saying kind words to her. And I think she's doing those things to make Tricia feel better about struggling to read. I'm not sure. I think we're going to stop right there for now, boys and girls. So today what we practiced doing was we practiced finding the character motivation. To do that, we have to find the character's problem, and then we go and we look for the character's actions and their dialogue, what they say, and the things that they do to help other people and the things that they say to other people. So we look for character motivation by checking out and figuring with text evidence what the character is doing to solve her problem. Okay, we'll read the rest of the story in next week. See you soon.